Uh, Good morning, uh, colleagues, students, and especially our young interns. Uh, we are going to listen to Professor Keshav Das on a topic: micro, small, and medium enterprises and industrial clusters in India, issues in policy and research. Uh, what is my job? Welcome. Yeah, my job is essentially to welcome all of you. You know that I'm very much a welcoming person. A special welcome to those who have joined online. I was noting the presence of Professor Narayana, and he also is a person who is dearer to the speaker and as well as I am, because he's our teacher. And while welcoming all of you, I will take an additional responsibility. Maybe in 2 minutes, it can go much longer, of introducing the speaker. That is also my task. How do I introduce you, Professor Das?
Best is to introduce, as we met maybe more than 40 years back. So that's the
Almost 41 years now, almost. Yeah, I think September 1983. And I think I will, perhaps I recollect how I introduced Hasib Drabu to all of you, our common classmate. I know that you won't remember, because if you were to remember all of that, there are so much better things to remember than this. So I'll repeat that once again. I would like to do that in a manner which ideally should touch you. So I'm trying to kind of provide you, or rather induce you to think a situation after say 40 years. You are getting an opportunity to introduce one of your colleagues, one of your friends who are sitting nearby as a speaker after 40 years. This is the situation which, in a sense, I am in. I think sometime in sometime in August. The course started in August 83.
But we met in
First week of, yeah. And Professor Das was one of my closest friends. I mean, not one of the closest friends, because his room was just opposite to mine. And he has learned a lot of bad habits from me, including smoking and drinking. But these are nobody is recording it, I suppose. After the MPhil, we both joined for, he left for Indian Express. So he had an experience in working with Indian Express as a journalist. After that, he joined for PhD. And the research topic was on regional development broadly. And he was very much concerned about mica, and that in Orissa. Andhra, yeah, right. And I think that is of relevance for you guys today, because these natural resource rich states, how is their fiscal position vis-a-vis the states which produced human capital? Some set of states produced manufactures, some states produced natural resources, some other states invested in human capital. So what was the fiscal implications of these different kinds of states in a country like ours? It's something which one could actually reflect upon, because to begin with, one can say that it's not my lecture, of course. To begin with, so that when you are producing something which is saleable, particularly manufacture or minerals, you can get royalty or taxes. You can collect tax on that. Suppose you have produced agriculture, I mean, you cannot get tax. Suppose you produce human capital, that being mobile, they will move away. they will go to other states. And you cannot get any tax on them. This in turn help other states. Okay, now moving to, then he worked on, then his broad area of interest is actually very much known for his area work on MSMEs, industrial clusters, and global value chains. And of course, he worked on innovation also. That's what later we worked together on inclusive innovation systems. And in the very young age, I think he got Vicario Prize, which made all of us a bit jealous of him. And he has held visiting positions in a number of universities. Shane in South Africa, ISS in Netherlands. He was also in Chiba, IDS Japan, and so many other universities in France and Italy also in it. So then coming to his publication, I wanted to say that he has a dozen of books, 2 less than a dozen. Almost. I think it may soon become 12. After the PhD, he joined in IDS Jaipur. Am I right?
No, GID.
GID, sorry, GIDR. There he retired. From there, he retired as a professor. I was thinking Jaipur. So then he has held in visiting position within the country, Indian Council of Cultural Relations professor, then also IHD professor. Currently, he is the dean at the Kalinga Institute of Technology in charge of economics, School of Economics and Commerce. I would say that, and he's also editor of Orissa Economic. You are in charge of Orissa Economic Association? Yeah, Orissa Economic Journal, so, yeah. So I think, at least I can say that he has got an academic record which we never thought in 1983. I don't know whether you imagine that. This will be your case. And I think your generation in any way, any day, much smarter than you, smarter than us. And your endowments are very, very different than what we were confronted with. For example, when I was writing a letter to Professor Richard Nelson for a postdoc guidance, I had to wait for 2 weeks. That's not the case. Today, you can pick up the phone and call. Okay, can I come? So the point I'm saying that, okay, I introduced Professor Das in a manner to tell you that you have much, much more accomplishments possible than what we have. And that is possible in a sense, well, though I said that he has got these areas of expertise, on a wide range of issues I could discuss it. And I would like you people also, why being public finance experts, and your expertise should not be confined to public finance. And also, an expertise which we claim on public finance without understanding of the economy will not be having an expertise grounded in reality. So if you want to know about the honey, you should know about the flower. So it is in this context that we thought Professor Das was here, so I asked him to invite him, and he was kindly agreed. And I'm very thankful to you. And most warmly, we invite you to give family, and I thought we should be able to continue our kind of association with these words. Yeah. Please, over to
you. Thank you so very much, Professor Joseph. I hesitate to call him Professor Joseph because as he described, we have been friends for more than 4 decades, not a short time. And also to not just being friends, but then being together in several moments of happiness and crisis. So that has sort of held us together. Very, very close, very personal friend of mine. So it's a huge opportunity for me. One is being part of an event here at GIFT. Incidentally, Professor Gulati also taught us both. Although I learned nothing about finance, taxes and money and banking, as you all are experts here. In fact, before I came here, I was sort of hinting at whether I was the right person or even remotely right person to be talking to scholars who are experts in a subject in which I have very little knowledge. But then I thought, as Joseph did mention, I think unless you sort of know the larger dimensions of the economy within which finance might be sort of operating, probably. It's very, very significant that we sort of relate to larger processes, larger sort of issues in sectors, and of course, as part of this specific event, I will also be talking a little bit about issues in policy and research. So what I'll do is I'm not very sure whether this topic will interest you at all. I do a lot of field work, in fact. So some of my presentation also relate to my whatever learnings from the ground. And also I'll be telling a little bit about policies and research issues in a sector that we sort of describe as the micro, small, and medium enterprises, or MSMEs for short. But then the medium category, that is the second M in MSME. So that was introduced only relatively recently, sometime in 2006, October 2nd. And before that, there was nothing like a medium category in enterprises officially declared. So for a long, long time, we used to call it as SSIs, the small scale industries or small scale enterprises. So the medium, so I want to highlight on that, was introduced much later. Let me also mention that this is a sector in which we have had a lot of interest, that is policy interest, for a long, long time. In fact, I don't know whether you can see the screen. Could you please share this? So this is a sector which has attracted a lot of attention in the policy domain, because this was also a sector which was seen as generating local employment, local jobs at various skill levels. And it was also seen as something which might be using local resources, local skills. So the MSMEs also were seen as a kind of a mechanism by which you could probably prevent sort of distress migration from the rural to the urban areas. This was also, so the MSMEs also include enterprises in the rural areas. So this was also seen as one major conduit through which you could promote trade, even when you might be sort of working with sort of products which might not be very high-tech in nature, but then it could be a craft product, but then might be in great demand. So this is one sector which really attracted a lot of attention way back in 1938 when we had the National Planning Committee. So 38, much before we got our independence. So there was something called a National Planning Committee, and there was a special sort of working group, which was sort of focusing on the role of small-scale enterprises. As I did mention, this was to generate jobs. That remains a sort of central concern of this sector. And also, this also was sort of seen as a kind of a site of innovations. So that is how maybe the MSMEs attracted a lot of attention. Despite, and then of course in recent times when we are sort of linked globally, we also very often talk in terms of the MSMEs are the ways through which you can sort of link to the global buyers, or what you sort of very roughly describe as the sort of joining the global production networks or the global value chains, in which even a small producer could be part of a larger production process. But then, having said all this, with all the excitement around MSMEs and sort of like described as the engine of growth, etc., when you sort of come to the information on this, that is the official statistics on this sector, which is a very serious policy matter, because if you want to intervene, then you must have enough sort of reliable, responsible data on this. And sort of we are told that there are about 63.4 million sort of MSMEs producing more than 8,000 products, engaging about 111 million people, So these are all from the official, whatever their annual reports and from their ministries' websites. Sort of 45% of the total manufacturing production accounted for by this sector, 40% of total exports, contributes about 8% of GDP, all that. But then I'll come to the data part very much in a moment. In fact, I very much want to relate to you as young scholars regarding challenges in official statistics. But then before that, I would like to mention that when we're talking of the MSMEs, let's be very, very clear that we are actually almost bent too much on the first M, that is the micro enterprises, which account for more than 99% of the enterprises are the part of MSMEs. So when you are talking about intervention, you are talking about challenges facing this sector, and if you are not talking very much on the micro enterprises, you are talking very little. So these are essentially very, very tiny enterprises, often home-based, and they account for something like, the micro units account for something like 97% of the employment. And the most significant part of this sector is that this is very, very largely, overwhelmingly in the domain of informal sector. So meaning thereby they are not exactly linked to varieties of sort of whatever benefits, financial support that might be coming from through, let's say, the formal banking systems. So much of the money that is required by the micro enterprises, which sort of dominate the MSMEs, they are not in the formal sector. So these are sort of, and of course, more than 50% of them are based in rural areas. So when we're talking about this sector, it's very, very important that we know a little bit about what we are saying. And very often, a lot of literature on MSME sort of like talk about technology transfer and joining the global sort of value chains. But then maybe we are talking about relatively better off small enterprises or medium enterprises, and you know nothing about the micro enterprises, which are also participating in the global production network, about which I'll be talking very soon. But before that, so let me say, as we are sort of speaking in 2024, we have official statistics on this sector, of which we take so much of pride, the engine of growth of India. The latest data we have on the census is as old as in 2006-7. So that is the latest data, so close to 2 decades old data that we are sort of holding on to, and much of the comments that you are making relates to that data. So that simply shows that maybe the excitement we have shown over the contribution of this sector is not quite matched by even receiving some kind of a basic minimum information. Even the number of units, I think we have no such clue. And in terms of the way we have defined it, till recently, till July 2020, so we shall define in a manner that no one in the world ever thought in terms of defining, that is sort of defining an enterprise on the basis of the historical value of investment in plant and machinery. So nowhere in the world it is done. Like I've given some little examples from different countries and different sort of global development agencies, sort of where it is typically based on the employment size, employment and turnover, a kind of a mix of that. And nowhere it is the historical value of investment in plant and machinery. Like for that matter, suppose you take a sort of like a factory like Nirma, let's say the detergent powder factories, which was started sometime in the 70s. So at that time, going by the value of investment in plant and machinery in Nirma detergent factory, so that was sort of maybe classified as a small or a micro enterprise. And over the decades, that has not really changed. And many of the enterprises, when you do a field survey, you realize that they actually do not know what was the value of their plant machinery when they started, maybe, I don't know, 20 years back. And sort of we have been changing the definition of enterprises over the years, as sort of I've shown it here. And that I did very clearly mention, repeated in the very beginning about the introduction of the medium category. So that was essentially to sort of ensure that we'll be sort of, if you are having a medium category, so maybe it is better in the global trade agreements to talk in terms of certain kinds of participation in the global value chains, and so focusing more on the export oriented units. So that was how the medium category was introduced. But then we must not forget, even today, with all the data issues that we have, the MSMEs are very, very much dominated by the micro enterprises. In 2020, 20 July, so we went in for a new definition as we sort of moved from the what I was talking about, the investment, the value of investment in historical value of investment in plant and machinery. So from that, we sort of moved to, we included the annual turnover. So there have been a lot of dissatisfaction over the way this new composite criteria has been sort of developed because many think that maybe the micro has not really received due attention in this, and there'll be maybe I'll come to that the concerns of the micro in this new definition. But before that, there is some information which I used to share with you. This is a kind of a rare information only available for the year 2017. I happen to capture this information, so it really shows you that in several of the Indian states, and which are sort of shown in red in the slide, you will find, and many of them, like they are UP, Bihar, Kerala, Chhattisgarh, Karnataka, Odisha, and all that. So many of the states had micro enterprises, which was the original level was that below 25 lakhs of the investment criterion. In fact, more than 90% of the enterprises in these states had sort of micro units which had investment limit only less than 5 lakhs. So meaning thereby what I'm trying to suggest is, so there is a huge need to recognize that even within the micro, there is a huge number of sort of units which are, I don't know whether you call them. So one of the major policy suggestions that I have made to the Niti Aayog recently is to sort of bifurcate the micro category, we call it whichever way, micro 1, micro 2, tiny, whatever word you like. But then you have to really make a distinction between that within micro, you are essentially talking of extraordinarily small units, or sort of like very often if you are sort of seeing the national sample survey data, you are using the unorganized manufacturing data, what are known as the OAMEs, the own account manufacturing enterprises, which do not engage any hired workers. So that's the kind of policy intervention. One is focusing on micro, and within micro, there is a large proportion of the very, very small ones. And in terms of official statistics, I thought I'll spend a little time on this, and I'll go very fast after this. So don't worry, don't get bored with this. But I think it's very, very important for us to know that the official statistics, like let's say, suppose I have taken from the 1990 till 2005-6 till when the medium category was not introduced. So you find that very, very strangely, if you see the second column in red, so I just calculated the annual growth rate of the number of units in the micro, in the SSI sector, and that has grown for the close to 18 years, and grown by a providential rate of 4.07%. So that is what, that means this data, this is the official statistics, which tells me that for 16 or 18 years, the small enterprises in India grew exactly at 4.07% every year for 18 years. So meaning thereby, there is something absolutely problematic with the data that we are dealing, even if it is the official statistic. Then coming post 2006, when we sort of introduced the medium category, we have again another kind of a data issue, like for instance, 2013-14 that I have again shown in red there. Sort of we have again sort of fallen into a trap because we started using data which was estimated from the NSSO 73rd round data, that is 2015-16 data, that showed that there were about 63.4 million units and 111 million employment figure, which I mentioned in the very beginning of my presentation. And all these years, that is from 2015 till 2023, these numbers have not changed. So these are official, this is not statistics cooked up by me, these are official statistics. So suggesting that while in the first, 18 years, it grew by 4.07%, and from 2015 onwards, it has not grown at all because the figures have remained the same, both the employment and the number of enterprises. And if I really sort of plot a graph on the growth rate, so I have nothing interesting to write home about, in terms of the greatness of this sector, because it simply shows me that from 2015 till today, this sector has grown just at 0%. So is there something wrong in our policy or something wrong with the markets or the enterprises? So that is where I think, so if you're talking about any intervention, including even the financial support which sort of came as part of the Atmanirbhar sort of package during the COVID or the post-COVID times, we really do not know what is the percentage of the enterprises that which received this kind of a support, because we have no clue about the number. And there is a different sort of like, what should I say, different source, which is sort of known as Udyog Aadhaar. It was initially known as, now it is known as Udyog. So there you get, this is a kind of it's a platform, online platform in which the enterprises can sort of register. And even there, like some, not more than about, if I sort of like, I've taken data up to March 23. So it's very, very small percentage of data or of enterprises who have even registered in the Udyam portal. So meaning thereby, this is a sector completely shrouded in mystery in terms of even the number of enterprises, in terms of number of people engaged in that, and we know so very little about what is happening to technology, what is happening to markets, and we have very, very little, practically no information on data relating to the GVCs, the global value chains. Even if you sort of take the OECD TIVA data, the trade in value-added data of the OECD, which is often sort of used to sort of estimate your like contribution from the small sector as part of the global value chains. Even there, we have very, very little information in terms of which firms they are working for, how many workers were there, what kind of value addition was there, and we know nothing about the tier 2, tier 3 firms, which are part of the global value chains. And in terms of our sort of exports from this sector, again, there is very little data available. And if you sort of take the red line, which is the sort of value in the rupees, so this shows that maybe there has been a rise, but then we are told that when you sort of deal with exports, it's better you take the dollar values, and that is in the green, and which shows there has been heavy fluctuation in terms of the growth of exports from small enterprises, and in which we have taken a lot of pride. We sort of said that, coach, it's close to 40 to 45% of the products from this sector are being exported. But when it comes to the data on exports from RBI, it shows that maybe we have not done so very well. And in terms of data on exports from this sector, I mean, I've been sort of like a avid follower of the information on this, but then beyond 2007-8, I have no official information on MSMEs by sort of broad product groups. And if I take the older data, the latest data, as I'm showing you at 2007-8, so it sort of suggests about 7 to 8 broad product groups sort of accounting for more than sort of 85% of the total value of exports from this sector. So this is a kind of a sector that we are talking about, in which we thought that the whole of India's employment crisis will be addressed. So there have been serious sort of persistent, what you call classic constraints facing this, and so this is based on sort of kind of detailed field survey that me and 4 of my colleagues from Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, we had conducted all India level. That was so far that is the largest coverage in terms of this sector is concerned. And from that, sort of we had some of these issues relating to the loan finance, as I sort of did mention a bit on that. There is a question of access to basic business infrastructure, whether it's sort of roads, whether it's electricity, whether it is water for these enterprises. And of course, there are larger issues relating to cluster development, about which I'll be talking very soon. And also, there have been unfavorable terms of the global production networks. And so these are some of the data from the RBI, essentially suggesting that the share of the MSMEs in terms of loan, formal sector loan, has been on the decline. Again, even if it is part of the priority sector lending, the MSCs, the micro and small enterprises, that has been on the decline. And the other excitement comes from the new announcement, which was made in 2015, that might be of some interest to gift here. Maybe people in finance. I'm not a finance expert, as I sort of announced in the very beginning, but then I've sort of followed the Mudra sort of scheme. Is essentially it's a small loan. Actually, it gives loans below 10 lakhs to the enterprises, sort of categorized as whatever, some Sisu, Tarun, Kishore, and all that. I don't know what that really means, but anyway. So within this small, so there are sort of like size categories, and for whom, and these are largely targeted for the informal enterprises. So what really it shows, if you sort of track the data from 2015, since when it started till whatever 2023, so there has been a rise in the amount sort of sanctioned, the amount, the number of accounts, that's the number of enterprises which have taken loan from this, that has increased. The amount disbursed has increased. So while that may be a cause for celebration that the smaller enterprises have got small loans, but then what really we must sort of look into is the third graph, that is the average loan size, which has been on the rise, suggesting that these are relatively larger of the small units which have actually sort of accessed this Mudra loan, and the small units have not quite benefited from this. And sort of coming to the infrastructural inadequacy, so as I did mention, based on a large number of field survey in more than some 13 states that we have done, and subsequently I've done several surveys in several states. So issues relating to transportation, issues relating to warehousing, issues relating to access to electricity, water, common effluent treatment plants for certain kinds of polluting enterprises, for instance. So these have remained larger issues for us. And so this is just because, I mean, this may not be of much interest today, but I thought because we are talking about the MSME, so there is something called reservation in the small scale sector. So that was so essentially, it was sort of something like, I mean, there was no great logic behind that why certain products had to be sort of reserved to be produced exclusively in the small scale sector, because these numbers kept on changing depending on varieties of moods and demands of varieties of political leaders. And so this has been varying and sort of went almost up to 800 in number. That includes biscuits, that includes furniture, that includes footwear, that includes chutney, achar, and all those sort of small little things, that umbrellas in Kerala, for instance. So these are all reserved. So these used to be the reserved items, essentially sort of suggesting that it's kind of a protectionist measure taken, that the relatively larger enterprises should not get into this, and the small enterprises should do good business. But then we also know, even in the 70s, 80s, even the 90s, there is a company called Britannia, for instance, which was manufacturing biscuits. And there was a company called Godrej, for instance, manufacturing office furniture, for instance. So there have been several violations of that, even when these are exclusively reserved for the small enterprises, so they hardly got the benefit. And but then, as I mentioned, that the study that we did, me and my friends in IIM Ahmedabad, which we submitted to the Ministry of Industry. So through that, we had actually asked for sort of getting out of this reserved list, because even many of the producers in the small scale sector would not know that they are producing something which is reserved, and there might be certain government benefits. I will not take much of your time. Maybe I should sort of hurry up. I'll go a little fast, but I will still remain very clear. So I hope. So, I mean, this is a sector which we have paid too much of attention to. I think nowhere in the world people would have talked so much in terms of the policy, even when we did not know how many enterprises are there in the sector, how many people are working. But then we have formed several committees and so talked about enhancing competitiveness. So like networking, so we must ensure financial sustainability, whether through Mudra or not. So there have been several initiatives taken, and this has remained one of those sort of key sectors which has attracted policy attention. And within that, by 1997, there was a sort of new thing which sort of, again, in the policy domain broadly, I happened to attend that particular event as the only academic person in a policy crowd. So this was a major event held in Mysore in 1997. So I happened to be there. And so what has happened was, like, they had invited all the industry secretaries from all the states. The Ministry of Industry, of course, was there. And then sort of coming up with a great idea that we must promote the industrial clusters. I'll talk about that a little bit. That's a subject very close to my heart. And So through that, so promoting MSME. So the clusters are actually linked. This is actually, it's a kind of a spatio-sectoral concentration of enterprises working in the same or similar kind of areas. So there are two dimensions. It's different from a typical MSME. MSME is typically, we are talking about a subsector. And when we're talking clusters, we are talking about a subsector and a space or kind of a place where that is sort of based. And sort of like, just because you're students who might be interested, very quickly, I'll take about maybe 2-3 minutes to explain this. And this is the sort of origin of discussions on industrial cluster. There is something. So this idea originally was with Alfred. Sorry. Okay. So this is an idea way back in 1920s, sort of which came from Alfred Marshall, talking about how sort of like essentially talking about agglomeration economies, talking about like externalities, talking about how certain innovations which sort of might happen in a micro space or even within a factory might also sort of go freely to other enterprises. So this idea was always there, almost 100-year-old idea. But sometime in 1984, there was a very interesting book which came out, known as The Second Industrial Divide, Possibilities for Prosperity. So this is a book written by a political scientist and an economist. And sort of like this was also a time, as you know, that following the oil crisis of the 1973 and 1979, so the whole world was in trouble in terms, particularly the large integrated plants were finding it very difficult to manage sort of producing mass-produced goods for which the demand was either sort of falling or it was fluctuating. So that is the time so they did this huge sort of survey to figure out that in moments of crisis when there is sort of no certainty for a demand for produce, so how or what kind of industries are sort of doing very well. And in that, they found that it is not actually the large enterprises. In fact, they found that these are actually essentially the small enterprises, and very often in the traditional sectors, whether it is furniture, whether it's garments, whether it is jewelry, whether it is tiles. So all kinds of these sectors in which largely small enterprises were engaged globally. So they were the ones who were actually doing much better at a time because they could sort of like go in for a small batch production. They could sort of go in for niche markets. They could sort of identify sort of the demands of the specific customer, and they could sort of manage with the given whatever existing technology, skills, etc., which a kind of a big company like a Ford car company, for instance, so could not actually sort of break down its operations to sort of like cater to smaller needs. And that's where the other thing they found that is the small enterprises in certain sectors, they are doing very well, including in the global market. And the special quality they found that it was not just the small size of them, but also they were together. So like especially they were together, and that's where this whole idea of collectivity or the clusters came up, and sort of then sort of people again started referring back to Alfred Marshall, saying that maybe way back in 1920s, he had talked about this. And so like, so I'll not get into details of that, but I'll give you a little example just to cut into your boredom. So like, a kind of a concept which sort of developed that time known as flexible specialization. So it sort of sounds contradictory, isn't it? Like something which is flexible cannot be specialized. But then it's sort of like, so that was the essence of the industrial clusters that one was talking about. It's like if I may give you a very quick small example, suppose in a village, for instance, there is a carpenter, and so with very limited tools, etc., limited demand, and sort of like the varieties of customers that the carpenter has to actually address to in terms of their, you want a round table, I want a cot, someone wants a particular chair and all that. So all this, the carpenter is able to manage with very little investment and with the given skill set, there are workers there and whatever little technology they have. But then at the end of the day, the carpenter is actually able to produce a variety of things and sort of like catering to the very specific needs. So while it is specializing in manufacturing or producing a kind of a good, let's say, product, wooden furniture, for instance, it also is flexible in terms of catering to different kinds of demands, actually. So that is the sort of broad idea about flexible specialization. And then it was sort of found that if you are doing, you are planning to do well in your business, it is better that you sort of target in these markets. And these are, I will not take much time. This is my, when I was in ID Japan, I had sort of worked on this. So essentially 3S, I call it, like there is a subsector or sector, there is a space where it's located, and there is a certain kind of support system or synergy, essentially, so kind of a co-person, while you still compete within a cluster. And the cluster dynamism comes from networking and macro policy support, and what kind of markets you are targeting. So let me not get into that, but I'll spend a little time on some of the, let me also clarify here that while we have been very concerned about MSMEs and come up with large number of policies, we have nothing like a cluster policy or industrial cluster policy in India so far, even if we introduced this kind of a formally sometime in 1997. But then we have like very indirect ways by which these things have come in. And one such particular cluster idea which has sort of engaged the small enterprises, the MSMEs, are actually sort of something which have come from Japan. So this is actually known as the flowchart approach to cluster development. And that is what, in fact, if you sort of know that our tie-up with JETRO, the Japanese External Trade Organization, in terms of developing the the Delhi-Mumbai industry corridor, for instance, which is essentially like there are sort of like what you call as the anchor firms, or let's say the Japanese lead firms. Sort of they have their facilities at sort of certain spaces, whether in Baroda, whether in sort of Karnataka, whether in Delhi. But then the local state has to provide for a variety of infrastructure support, including electricity and land. And sort of so there are sort of clusters who are sort of working around an anchor firm and producing for them. So that was sort of seen as one way by which, so that this is something which, so that is also a way of promoting MSMEs and promoting clusters. But at the same time, what you must recognize that even while you are sort of working as a kind of a supplier to the, let's say, large producer, maybe you are, the way you are chosen as a supplier, that is very strict process. So there may be 10,000 small enterprises ready to be joining this company, but they might choose just about 10 to 11. So that is one such issue. So this is the Delhi-Mumbai industry corridor that I was sort of talking about. So there's a lot of talk about this, that the Japanese government is going to invest, but we really must recognize that in a country in which you have huge number of micro and small enterprises, and if they are not getting a chance to be picked up by the anchor firms, to be their suppliers or to be the producers of their parts, then maybe this is something which needs to be rethought. So from there, I will now sort of, I'm almost tapering down. I will not take much of your time. So I thought, as I did mention, that I do a bit of field work and all that. So I shall take you through 2 or 3 such small enterprise clusters, and so that to give you a kind of a feel of the ground. So let me first talk about, there is something called a ceramic cluster in Morbi. Morbi is in Saurashtra region, or the northwestern part of Gujarat. So this is a very, very interesting cluster in the sense that this has been, and I have sort of resurveyed it once I did in 1998, then to 2018 again. So there has been something like more than 1,000 units. And in the early days, in the 90s, when I did this 90s and even in 2000s, so this was essentially catering to the local Indian market, sort of producing what is sort of known as the mosaic tiles. And and then the whole Indian market was flooded with Chinese goods. And you'll be quite sort of amazed to know that this is a very small place. And this is also the place from where you get the Ajanta clock actually is manufactured. So Ajanta clock and these tiles are manufactured. All the tiles that you use here, if they are not from China, they are definitely from Morbi actually. So, so that is the kind of, it is the largest producer now. And what they have done as a collective, though they are very, very small enterprises, as a collective, sort of they have come together, they have formed industry associations, they have sent representatives to China, they have learned their techniques and sort of completely changed their technology from kind of a what is known as the bhatti, that is the kind of a firing the bricks and the tiles. From that, they have shifted to sort of high-speed diesel and a kind of tunnel technology, which is actually used in China. And you will be surprised that since 2014 onwards, if you see the UN Comtrade data on our exports and imports of the tiles, the ceramic glazed tiles, so you'll find that we have in fact surpassed China in terms of our whatever exports. And we have been now exporting to more than 60 countries, including several developed nations. And that all goes from a small place called Morbi. So it was quite possible because of the collectivity, that is the enterprises coming together, the state providing certain kinds of crucial support. And as shown in this particular graph, the state also provided, invested in a kind of state highway, sort of linking to this industrial cluster to the Kandla port. So meaning thereby even a support like infrastructure support, which is non-industrial or non-subsectoral in some sense. It is not nothing to do with ceramic per se, but then it actually opened up a way to exports. And so these kind of sort of interventions may have to be thought through if you are talking about promoting this sector. So these are some of the tiles, etc. From there, and this place I've gone several times, and very, very high quality products that you get from here. So from there, so it is from there we move to another sort of cluster, which is essentially targeting leather footwear of a traditional kind, which are mostly known as the Kolhapuri chappals. This is a place called Athani near Belgaum. So this is a kind of a cluster of villages, historically sort of engaged in tanning, local tanning, and sort of producing whatever leather sheets. And but then this was recognized by none other than the Central Leather Research Institute, which is a central research body. So they have a kind of a setup there in Athani, so targeting that, and this has been there for more than 35 years now, and targeting the local artisans to come there and sort of learn how to use certain kinds of machineries. But then, despite all that, nothing much happened. And as I go to this place, I find that the CLRI, which is a central sort of institute. So I inquired why the local artisans are not going to a facility which is just next door. So I was told that the Central Leather Research Institute, that whatever works up there, they are actually having machineries meant to manufacture boots. And this is a cluster which is actually all through manufacturing Kolhapuri chappals. So which are two different things. So that means all these 35 years, all the people who are sort of like employees there, etc., with all the claims that we may have made that the government has done for these artisans. So there is a complete de-link between what the local artisans know of, what they're looking forward to, and what the state has provided. But in the same place, sort of you find there is another in fact, kind of an NGO named Ascent, led by a lady entrepreneur called Madhura Chhatrapati. So she sort of comes and sort of engages with the local producers there and sort of introduces varieties of sort of changes, including product innovation. Might interest Joseph for that matter. Like in this very small place, so more than 600 different, I've just shown a very few here. So the same people, the same artisans using the same tanning and whatever technology. So they have produced more than 600 different kinds of sort of whatever footwear, and they're exporting to more than 40 countries. And they are there in the World Trade Fairs in Dusseldorf or wherever. So, and they have given a brand name called Toe Hold. So what I'm trying to suggest is that it is very much possible that when you might be sort of engaged in a kind of a local traditional sector with local skills, etc. So it really needs how you sort of link to the larger markets and what kind of interventions are needed. It is not just the bank loan through Mudra that is going to change the life of the small enterprises. It actually, you have to really relate to the markets there. And so this is the third and the last cluster, which I think I've taken a lot of time. I'll just quickly, just a little bit is there. So this is in Odisha. It's a kind of a, this is a stone crossing cluster actually. So essentially there are more than 1,000 sort of units which are sort of crossing stones, mostly sort of targeting the building in industries or the roads, etc., for which there has been a huge demand. But what has happened, the entire place is sort of like heavily polluted because the stone crushing is done through extremely unscientific manner, using sort of just hammers and like, so there is no rules, regulation that is applicable. And so what has happened, there has been a huge stone dust, sort of which has sort of destroyed the agricultural fields, the water bodies. People have been falling sick. Many people have left that place, and this is now run by migrant workers coming from Chhattisgarh and Jharkhand in a state like Odisha to work. And so, very interestingly, very interestingly, the Central Pollution Control Board, which has sort of come up with a technology by which actually, so they think that if you like sort of, it's like a shower you take in your bathroom. It's like a few showers sort of fitted to those points where the dust might emanate the most, and that's where sort of it will sort of like it will dunk the dust. So that is how it was sort of planned. And despite that, as you do a field survey there, so you figure out that most of these crossers, they have that thing facility there, but they are not using, because their argument is that to do that, they might have to spend on electricity to run a motor, and they need to arrange for water for this thing, so which sort of add to the unit cost of whatever they are selling. And so in that process, so these are sort of the sites where, so you can see that little white pipe or whatever. So those are actually so if you go to the CPCB, Central Pollution Control Board documents, you find that this is the new technology, very relevant, but then no one is sort of using. These are sort of largely flouted there. So I thought with that, I sort of slow down my presentation. So we went through like 3 different MSME clusters where we have seen challenges, we have seen possibilities, and we have also seen that there are sort of maybe issues are not just confined to whether we give a loan or not. The issues are probably largely linked to the market, institutions, and infrastructure. And and you also have to explore whether the lack of that or the inadequacy of all these 3 have led to a kind of a disincentive to innovate, because innovation still holds the key for any enterprises to, in fact, grow. And right as you discuss this, we feel sorry about our data source, we feel sorry about the interventions, we feel sorry about having not understood this sector at all. Next door, within Asia, I don't have to go too far, a country like Thailand, for instance, a country like Japan, for instance, Malaysia, for instance. So these are countries that they have really gone in for very, what you may call as institutional innovations by introducing ideas like OBOP and OTOP, that is the one village, one product, and one tambon, one product ideas. Essentially, these are sort of institutional innovations targeting the very small enterprises, and sort of not really disturbing them from their local basis, and sort of helping them to market their products internationally, like, for instance, using the Thai Airways, using the Thai embassies to promote their very local products with very little cost. And so far as the data is concerned, while we in India might be thinking of world class, even a country like Thailand has actually sort of has excellent data on the micro, small, medium enterprises, because the data they have collected by sort of engaging college students, I mean, at the undergrads during their holidays, sort of like it was fun for the students, they got a little money, and they're the ones who sort of went around and collected detailed information on the micro, small enterprises. And there have been several incentives provided by the state and several non-state agencies. So there are ways to rethink. If you're talking about policy, if you're talking about research, I think first is definitely we have a stronger database. In fact, we have made a strong case to go in for the next, whatever, the 5th MSME census. That's to be, hopefully it will be done anytime now. But with all that, we still have a long way to go. And just one word about, if you're talking about the participating in the global production networks, we are still very much in a very, so we are in the low value adding chain of the global, whatever the production network structure. We are essentially either sort of providing certain kinds of basic raw materials or into very low value adding processing or assembling, which also means, I'll just go fast, which also means that essentially these are the tier 2, tier 3 firms, which are small firms. Again, So they are the ones where there is no code of conduct which is applicable. So we really need to rethink whether there is a role of the state to come in, and how to ensure that even while participating in GPNs, it is beneficial to our local producers. I will not get into this. I will not get into this. And so with this, let me not just get. So with this, I also must add that I did not say much about the craft sector, the rural area. So that is another long story. But essentially, my idea was to introduce you to this sector, which is much talked about, what kind of sort of policy deficiencies we have. And this is a sector which still has a lot of hope in terms of generating employment. But then unless you have a better linkage with wider markets, this sector is not going to do very well. Thank you very much.
I think that was a wonderful journey to the micro enterprises sector, I suppose, not so much medium and small. I think it was in essence an eye-opener in the sense of very poor information base. In fact, I think I was just yesterday flipping through our Joseph Stiglitz's book. So the idea is, he was saying that the neoliberalism has given too much disaster. In fact, the idea was that the opposition would say that, okay, we have not really gone to the extent that we should. In fact, Anno Kroger would say that, okay, we should climb a little bit more. We have not climbed enough. He was saying that if you really climb, it will be real disaster. Not so much happened. So here is when the state is trying to withdraw in the name of leaving things to market, any kind of informed policy making is possible at all, first of all, to begin with. But there again, you have shown some interesting or optimistic scenarios, as in the case of Morbitile cluster. Learning from elsewhere, competing in the market, both the domestic as well as international. So that essentially means that there are possibilities, but to what extent we are actually exploiting that, I think that's a very important question which you have kind of raised. And I think your story about the Kolhapuri and the crusher, your Orissa cluster, these are very interesting cases. I think any broad-based theorizing or any broad-based policy making is not possible without a realistic understanding of the ground reality. I think it's an important insight that you have shown today. But as far as we here, I think you say that, what we are talking about for a public finance scholar. I would like to say that, the very paradigm of state taking minimalist role is not possible. If you take the case of developed economies, the size of the state is much, much bigger than what we have today in a country like ours. State intervenes in a much more effective manner in developed economies. That is precisely what is shown by, first, on the one hand, size of their budget, size of public expenditure, the size of tax revenue that they collect, proportion of tax base that they have is very evident. Now, here the question which may be of interest, I think you maybe also help us in terms of, even in, though they say that the state has been withdrawing, state indeed has been playing an important role. And more importantly, there is a kind of broader question of how do we finance development? Financing development is a very interesting area on the question of which our understanding with respect to it also has to be, apart from the macro level discussions in terms of your expenditure, debt and deficit. You don't really get down to the real dynamics of financing development at sectoral level. For example, someone who is working about, say, for example, small scale industry or industrialization, in GIFT should be ideally looking at how has we been financing development and what are the kind of dynamics of financing that has operated in successful clusters vis-a-vis elsewhere. And in a state like ours, and I'm sure in a country like ours, there might be very interesting, there must be interstate differences because state industrialization is not so much. Of course, you have Mudra and others at the national level. The state indeed plays an important role. It is in fact very much a part of the state list. So with respect to financing, and that financing has to be, of course, grounded in the approach of the policy of the government. So if you could kind of give us a quick snapshot in terms of the state's approach, how it has evolved over time, while I said that we have taken the hand completely off from the steering by leaving the market. I don't think that that may be right. That may be right because still state has been indeed playing a role. And any insight on that, that'll be very interesting for our kind of. But that cannot be done. That can be better done by you rather than anyone like ours because because your long experience and a careful observer of what has been happening will be interesting insight for my scholars to kind of start thinking on it. In fact, you might be opening a new area of research in that sense of the term. If you can briefly.
So I think that's the crucial point. Also, I was trying to convey through what, like, I mean, two things we saw. Like one is that from the formal sectors, there has been a decline. And in fact, what I did not show you because I did not talk about the village enterprises. In fact, if you find that between 1995 and 2008, actually it has completely collapsed. Actually, the share of loans from the formal sources to the village-based MSMEs have completely collapsed to zero, in fact. And very, very interestingly, while we have a large number of financial institutions, both in the public and the private domain, are very much active, and there are several banks which have the MSME separate branches for them. You'll be very surprised to know that the World Enterprise Survey that the World Bank conducts in different countries. So for India, we have the most recent ones in 2022, and before that, it was 2014. So if you take the World Enterprise Survey data of 2014 and 2022, and which talks a lot about what Joseph is asking. In fact, India, there has been a rise in the share of loans by small enterprises from the non-formal sources, particularly friends, relatives, and money lenders, paying more than 60% interest. So that is what the World Enterprise Survey. So that itself is a kind of a comment on what we have done to this sector in terms of financing that. And the other thing about like the subnational state sort of supporting them, there has been a huge reluctance from the subnational state, and they have tried, like, for instance, I don't know a little bit about Odisha, for instance, the Odisha State Finance Corporation. So one of the major issues that they faced was they could not sort of recover. See, the whole point is, I think, let me reiterate. So no business, whether it is small, micro, large, whatever, no business survives without an existing market or a market that you visualize. Okay, there is some market you think it can be created, or an existing market for which you are putting. No, you are not doing a charity for anyone, actually. So when we are talking about promoting the enterprises, we must necessarily talk about, at the same time, we have to talk about what kind of markets we are targeting. So if you are not really looking for wider markets, and you are thinking that the small enterprise will sort of produce more and innovate, that is not going to happen. And there have been some initiatives at the state level, several states, including in a state like Gujarat, in Tamil Nadu, in Karnataka. So they have invested in like some kind of a diversification of products using the sort of local whatever skills. So that is one way you can sort of finance not the enterprise in terms of the working capital need, for instance, but you sort of finance innovation, actually. And so that has often given sort of good results. And also a kind of a, like, if I may give you a little, now that Joseph asked, I suddenly remembered a small example. Like many years back, I had sort of done a little work on this bamboo based sort of activities, bamboo water crafts and all that in Arunachal Pradesh. I happened to sort of interact with someone who had received the president's gold medal, etc., etc. And so this is an area which is sort of in terms of the resources, that in terms of the bamboo as the raw material, so that there was no dearth to that. And the idea was that they wanted to compete globally. But in particular, the major competitor came from the Southeast Asian countries, even a country like Japan. So their point was that in terms of the craftsmanship, maybe we did very, very well. In fact, I have a lot of pictures with me, like kind of an umbrella made of bamboo things and all kinds of things they are made. But the point is, so they wanted a certain machinery which would sort of like bring out the slivers like at a much faster rate. That is, the productivity level will go up. Maybe in, let's say, 10 minutes, they can sort of bring out 100 slivers of a particular thickness, length, etc. And that would sort of help them sort of make whatever products, and for which they approach the state government. The state government, in the state handicraft board. So they said that they needed only one little machine which would not cost more than 4,000 rupees that time. And but then that never happened. So there was a training program for the local artisans as to how to use that a little machine to bring out slivers, which will sort of enhance their productivity. So the local banks were not ready to provide that loan. So there was a huge dealing between what the industry department was planning, what the enterprises were looking forward to, and the banks were completely against it. They said, we cannot give it to them because this is a business, we are not very sure whether they will repay back. And the state was not willing to subsidize even for. So there have been several such instances where um, like the subnational state could have played a significant role, but I often think it is better to invest in innovation and also to link that to the banking system actually. So only then maybe it would work. Otherwise,
Well, that's something which we could deliberate much more, but the floor is open.
So thank you. I would just have a clarification with regard to the stone crushing thing. So that is an industry there. Okay, so that's a cluster here. There. So I mean that I'm linking it with the fact that Orissa is one of the states that gets quite a good amount of money, revenue from the mining. So because that has to be from the mining, you know. Firstly, you have to mine, then you have to crush.
so this is a low value adding product. This is granite. This is not iron ore. So it's 9 years. But please go ahead.
Thing is that in northern Kerala, for example, from the district where I am from, we have a lot of laterite kind of units, but I think that is not in the industrial. It's not at all linked to the industry. The thing is that you get a permission from the mining and geology, and you just mine it and sell it. I think it's not in the industrial kind of thing. Maybe like if we are able to bringing to the cluster or something like that, maybe it can augment to the revenue of the state. I think, I mean, just thinking aloud.
So I think this is something which
So I was just curious, like you did the primary survey. So those clusters that you noticed, have those clusters actually induced development in those areas too? Like has the education, what do you say, level increased over there? Or what about the health? Has those clusters have had a spillover on all these things? I mean, has actual development happened over there? Especially the third case that you told, you said there is an externality of pollution also. So has it actually increased or decreased? Like, what is happening in those clusters? I mean, if there's no proper development, I mean, is there a this thing of having those clusters?
That's a very interesting question because, as I mentioned, it depends on what kind of. So it's not a homogeneous thing. Like you sort of go to Palar Valley, for instance, in Tamil Nadu. So you have this leather tanning thing going on there. So there are certain such activities which we mention as the polluting clusters, or whether it's air pollution or it's water pollution, or even for that matter, Tirupur. Like you have the Nitware, which is the famous Tirupur cluster, you see. So there has been so much of studies done because the local Noel River has been polluted because of all the chemicals that went in. So there is a role of the state and the industry association that they have to play in terms of preventing some of these issues. But in terms of knowledge gains and in terms of local employment creation, I would imagine that in several places, it has actually improved because this has also meant that a lot of new infrastructure has come up and many of these work, and particularly this Morbi cluster that I was mentioning. So now they have sort of come up with hostels for workers and their children and some sort of basic education facilities there. So those things are there. But then one of the issues which have really bothered us in many so-called well-known clusters, like for instance, Aligarh mein Tala, lock, the lock cluster in Aligarh in UP, so it was very famous. So now it is completely ruined because competition has come to China. So there are several issues. So not that just because you have clusters, everything will do very well. In fact, at some point, many years back, Joseph might remember, so I wanted to do a comparative study of the diamond cluster in North Kerala and that in Surat actually. So whether there is a kind of a possibility of linking them and all that. But then and that study I could not do for some reason, he knows that. So, but one issue was that certain kinds of local skills, which has been developed in, let's say, in a place like Surat in Gujarat, so that was not possible here. And in fact, after a while from here, there is an ample thesis on this cluster here. So from here, a lot of workers or those who were interested in this, so they migrated to Surat actually. They thought it is better that instead, and there are other issues of labor and all that. So it varies from place to place. But one thing is very clear that you have to rethink the markets and you have to rethink innovations. That is both why I showed that Kolhapur Chappal, that shows that you may think, oh, these are all sort of essentially low cost and they're dealing with a very ordinary product, they're very traditional. But actually, it is quite possible that they are the ones that came up with 600 different designs and they're sending to all kinds of countries and all different sizes and all that. They are doing exceedingly well. So it is very much like, for instance, if I may give you a very, can I take 2 more minutes? I'm suddenly reminded because I've done quite some clusters. So there is a saddlery clusters. You know, some saddlery, that is the seat, the leather seat on the when you play polo and all that, no, that seat. So there is a saddlery cluster in Kanpur. It was a very old cluster, and this was there during the British time because Britishers they played polo, and also the army, the British army also needed that. So then this was the place where this was manufactured, and this was wanted for more than 100 years. Then by 1960s, there was a decline. The Britishers had gone, no one was playing polo, and we didn't have too many horses. And so it is a very special, only when you have a horse, you need a seat, you see. So then this was an industry or a cluster which was on the decline. So then there was a big crisis. So what they did, they knew that they're really looking at a kind of a black patch. But nothing is possible because no one is going to buy a saddlery from someone, you see. So what they did, they came together and they sort of figured out that there must be other places outside India where there may be a demand. So what they did, so they collected some money and sent some three of their members to the Dusseldorf, the global, what do you call, the trade fair. And that guy, these three, they went to some samples and all that. So there they found that the Latin American countries, some of the poorer Latin American countries, they have a demand for this kind of product. Thoda cheaper hai chahiye. It's not very expensive, this, that. So they thought that this saddlery is quite good for them. And there was a huge demand from that. And these guys came back and they made announcement. They are now doing from Kanpur saddlery. So they are not manufacturing for India at all. So there is a huge demand, maybe global south, you may call them, but the global south has actually a market for a production unit in global south. So, and as it shows that if you see the trade data from 1950 till now, so the south-south trade actually has been on the increase. And that is where we need to really rethink. In several of these Latin American, African, in Kenya, for instance, so they have done so very well in the sector of garments. So they are doing very well, a country like Thailand. So many of these countries, so they have figured out, okay, these are the products in which they have some skill, but the key lies in diversification, sort of product and process innovation, and finding out new markets. So that is the policy challenge. Policy challenge is not that one bank will give you a little loan and then you don't want to go there because you are a micro enterprise fellow, so you are not wearing good clothes. You don't want to go to a very stylish bank there and to take a little loan actually. So maybe we have to target, create different kinds of typologies in terms of products, in terms of technology, in terms of markets, and what kind of intervention needs to be made. And you definitely have to look beyond the local markets actually. वो नहीं होगा तो आप कुछ नहीं कर पाएंगे.
Sir, actually, it's a clarificatory question. In one kind of industrial cluster, have been saying that these small enterprises should be produce some kind of an intermediary goods for a larger producer. So, in that kind of a cluster, there might be a possibility of contractualization. Then it will lead to some kind of question of labor things and all. Now the labor problem may be arise because the labor laws are getting more worse now. So that's my first thing. And the second thing about our Kerala thing, like we have a very decentralized structure of government, and also we have a strong force called Kudumbashree. So is there a possibility in Kerala that we could get into this thing and we can formalize these MSMEs more than other parts? Because decentralization, I don't know whether the decentralization of government will contribute to this formalization of MSMEs and all. That's the two things.
Value chain data, including work by Viramani and all that. So there has been a rise in our production or exports of intermediates from India. So that shows that maybe in certain kinds of sectors, particularly in auto parts and all that, there has been a rise in many of the smaller Indian enterprises working as subcontractors to global manufacturers. So there has been an increase, but the labor issue, I'm not very clear about that because these are also the states like Karnataka, a state like Uttar Pradesh, state like Gujarat, Tamil Nadu. These are the states which are sort of more into this. I'm not very familiar about the labor issues that you're talking about. The one thing that reminds me is like, for instance, in Pakistan, in Sialkot, so they actually did very well in terms of surgical instruments. So like they were exporting surgical instruments and also the footballs for the soccer balls. You see. So in both, there were sort of issues relating to labor in terms of training, in terms of working conditions, but those were sort of addressed because the state intervened. So it is quite possible that in this kind of GPM, the global production networks, that the state can actually play a significant role in ensuring certain basic minimum, whatever support is provided to the labor. The idea with the Kutumbashree that you are talking about, that's an example which everyone is quoting. The only thing is that really one needs to probably rethink markets beyond Kerala. That's where I would sort of imagine, because something which is doing so very well, so why not slightly diversify same things from Kerala, whether it is coir, whether it is wood, whether it is certain kinds of metals, certain kinds of food items. So that can actually, like for instance, Inji Poli, for instance, no, the Adrakka Achar. This is something which can have a much larger market than in India, than in within Kerala. So looking for newer markets, diversification, rethinking innovation. I think these are the keys. And Kutumasri, of course, institutionally, it's a strong body. So maybe we have to think beyond it.
Okay, I think your final question, because lunch is waiting.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of GIFT, I would like to thank Professor Keshav Das for accepting our invitation and for joining us here, and also giving an excellent exposition of the state of MSME sector in India at the macro level, and also providing us an excellent insights based on your field survey and those three clusters. You have really added a lot to our understanding of the MSME sector today. Thank you once again, sir, for joining us here. And I would like to thank our director for taking all the efforts to bring the experts in various fields within economics, and also not confining to the narrow boundaries of public finance, and trying to link public finance to other aspects. So I think this is, this is also kind of made us think how this particular sector could be linked to broad areas of public policy. And I would like to thank our PhD coordinators for making all the efforts to organize this particular lecture. And I would like to thank the participants, our PhD scholars and interns, and the participants online for joining this lecture. Last but not the least, I would like to thank our IT support team for making this hybrid event seamless, uh, success. Thank you again, once and all, and we would like to see your participation next time when we have another lecture. Until then, thank you, and join us for lunch.
For me, actually, it's absolutely as I said in the beginning, because it is Joseph. So I was really very happy, overwhelmed. And for me, it's like I'm part of a family in which Joseph is the father figure. And so it's so very nice, because we are very extremely close friends. So as he also leaked out some of as he leaked out some of this information which he shouldn't have, I have stopped smoking, by the way. I don't smoke anymore. So